tournament, and the young guys put their heads down, not out of respect, but because out of dread. They knew that Dr. John was probably going to come in and clean the mats with them. And that's what my guest today, Dr. John Terry, is. He's in his 50s fighting against 20-year-olds and has held titles in 4 states for 4 straight years. Phenomenal. Dr. John Terry is 53 years into his martial arts journey. He started at age 13, and it's been a strong underpinning of who he is and how he shows up in the world, which is awesome. He also does 30 years of business coaching for leaders and has written 2 books on black belt leadership. He runs the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame and is a author of Black Belt Leadership 101 and Black Belt Secrets of Success. And he spent his time showing people that they can do more than they think. And mindset's an important thing. And that what makes you great in business also makes you great in health. And that's where we come together today on this episode of Driven for Health. I'm Coach Brian Pranin. Dr. John, thanks so much for coming on. And let's open up with a big, strong one. What is one big takeaway you want our guys listening in to hear?
Well, Brian, I think if I could leave one thing with your audience right from the get-go, it's a quote from my book, Black Belt Secrets of Success. And having spent 2 years studying some of the most successful people that ever lived, one of the things I discovered about every single one of them is the fact that they do this. Successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do sometimes or not at all. Everybody wants to experience success at some level, but most people aren't willing to do what's necessary to experience the success they really want to have in their life, whether it's personal, professional, in their health, in their finances, in their relationships. All of those are geared to doing what successful people do to set the stage for success.
I love that. And let's expand on that because I definitely follow that motto as well of I want to be successful in multiple areas of my life with my family with 4 kids, my marriage of 20 plus years, my high school sweetheart to my career. I'm
Mhm.
driven to help people live a healthier, best lifestyle, be their best version in multiple different areas. And I approach it starting with health. And so what ends up being one of the main drivers of someone to start to put in their work to facilitate the success that they want? What do you see there?
I think Kobe Bryant is a brilliant example of that. If
Oh
you
yeah.
look at the life of Kobe
Oh yeah.
Bryant, when he decided, I want to play in the NBA, he did what nobody else was willing to do. He got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He spent 2 hours on the floor training before he had breakfast. After breakfast, he was back on the floor for 2 hours. After lunch, he was back on the floor for another two
Yeah.
hours. And then after dinner, the same thing. He did that consecutively, day after day, week after week, month
Yeah.
after month, year after year. And in an interview I heard a few years ago before he passed away, he was talking to someone on YouTube, and he said, I did that, and after a period of time, none of my peers could catch up. It
Yeah.
didn't matter what they did. I had been successful in my daily routine for so long. I was so far ahead, nobody could catch up.
Mhm, yes, yeah, and it's a compounding interest of dialing
100%.
things in. I remember Kobe with Mamba mentality, right? And
Absolutely.
one story was that s s someone showed up at 4:59, and he walked in at 5, and and he's like, "What? Come again?" So he came at, like, 4:45, and then the next time that guy came in, Kobe was there, and he tried to outdo him, and it just wouldn't work because
Absolutely.
the guy was so driven to do that
Yeah.
and be successful. And it's just when we think about it too, is a lot of the basics. How many shots had he taken? How many practice approaches to the to the hoop had he gone through? Spin, tuck, roll, whatever that he had needed to do to have the intuitive feel while he was there. So I absolutely love that. And guys, you have to practice, you have to work, you have to do these things on repeat. So
Mhm.
let's jump into some of your story of what got you into your own state of Mamba mentality and seeking out greatness for yourself with martial arts and all these things.
Well, for me, it started when I was 13 years of age. My parents relocated from a big city to a small town. And prior to the year, I was one of 95 kids on the football team. I got one snap of the football. And Brian, you can see I'm not the biggest guy in the world. The one play I
Right.
got in the seventh grade, they put me in as middle linebacker. And I got laid out and drug off the field. That was my entire seventh grade experience playing football.
Oh,
Moved to
wow.
this little small town, and dad's telling me there's only going to be 30, 45 kids on the team. You got a better chance to play. But what I didn't realize in that move was I was going to become the target of every bully in school because I was the new guy.
Ah.
I was the little guy. I was the easy target to pick on. So my dad's solution to that was to throw me in a martial arts school. Now, during that period of time back in the mid 70s, kids weren't taught martial arts. This was an adult world. So the instructor made an exception, put me in the room because he had a young girl that had joined his class in her early 20s, and I was her size. So dad's
Okay.
paying good money
Yeah.
for me to get beat up by a girl 3 days a week while I'm learning to
Okay.
defend myself.
Yeah.
And from that, I fell in love with the martial arts, not only because it gave me some confidence and gave me the ability to defend myself, but because I learned through that the value of living a disciplined lifestyle that
Yes.
went
Yeah.
beyond just walking onto the mat and punching and kicking, but the way that you show up every single day and everything that you do matters. And when you
Yep.
understand that and living that willingness to discipline yourself so you can prepare yourself for what is to come, it kind of reminds me of one of Dr. John Maxwell's famous statements. He says, leaders develop daily, not in a
Yep.
day. And
Right.
it's that discipline of showing up, doing what you know has to be done to become a better version of who you are and what you do. That's what to me stood out as something I wanted to model my life after.
I totally agree. And for me, that discipline showed up. I always felt like I was somewhat disciplined, I guess, but when I got into high school cross country and track, that became this facilitation to use that as a way. I always got good grades in school, so I was disciplined in getting good grades and all that. So this just ended up carrying over and was a physical expression, which has then now led me to even this year running a marathon or attempting to. My body, my 43-year-old body and 25-year-old mind. There's a lot of friction going on right now, but we're gonna persevere one way or
There you
another. I
go.
just got
Yeah.
some voodoo floss and a bunch of other things to help with just making sure my body operates right. But running. And then I was fortunate enough to have a gentleman, Leo Cormanek, who's still a good friend of mine and one of my best buddies, that Dan Smith, he actually invited me onto the team, to the track team, because he ran cross country. He's like, dude, you got to run with us. It's a lot of fun. Okay. And I'm actually going to see him in about 2 hours, and we're going to work out inside my barn here because that's what we do. That's how we spend time together, is through doing physical exercise, and then we talk. And he's got 4 kids and life's busy and all this, so it's a really communal time for us to do good things for each other too. So he got me into that, and Leo was actually a state qualifying uh, uh, like capacity, and he was just that good. And so he this drive that Leo had then rubbed off onto me, and next thing you know, I'm waking up early, I'm running on the weekends, and this track and field and cross country facilitated into just basically my 20s, running marathons, triathlons, and just being an undertone of this expression of who Brian is. He's an athlete, he is driven, and that's been an undertone that I've trained most of my life, most days of the week. And you can do hard things. And you can do a lot harder things when you do hard things on a regular
Correct.
basis with
Yeah.
exercise. So I absolutely love that. Now, you've achieved quite some good status with this and throughout your years of the martial arts. So let's jump into some of those, the black belt, and what that is and how you did it and what that means to you.
Yeah, I've been privileged to become a multidisciplined black belt over the years. Spending 53
Yeah.
years studying the martial arts, you get an opportunity to train with a lot of incredible people. I'm a three-time
Yeah.
Martial Arts Hall of Fame inductee, so I've been recognized by the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame, the Masters Hall of Fame, and the International London Martial Arts Hall of Fame. So having the
That's
opportunity
amazing.
to perform at that level is to me a recognition of time spent in preparation. When I was competing, I competed in the Southwest Association of Tournaments. That was a 4-state circuit. And when I was in my 40s and in my 50s, I competed in that circuit. And for 4 consecutive years, I was the number one ranked fighter, forms practitioner, and weapons practitioner. And after four
That's
years of
awesome.
showing up and competing against guys that were 20 to 30 years younger than me, because there was really
Yeah.
nobody, at my age that could compete at the level I did, I decided it was time for somebody else. So retired from active competition, sold my
Yeah.
schools, and leaned into the world of leadership and personal development. And that's
Hmm.
really been the space that I've really focused on, is helping people understand how they can become black belt masters of who they are and what they do as they
Yeah.
discover what I call their unique black belt leader within.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone buckle up, because I was joking with Dr. John before we started, and in our pre-conversation, we are very similar thinkers, and, and even things that he was saying is like, oh my gosh, I share this too. So Dr. John is a much wiser version of Brian, and I will emulate to continue being disciplined and focused to grow in my own mastery and abilities to help influence people to take better care of themselves. So let's jump into some of the undertones of what you teach now in your programs and with your students and all that, because there was a lot of similarities that we had together.
Oh, absolutely. One of the big things I focus on, and I touched on it early on, Brian, in the conversation, is the fact that I want to help people become better at who they are and what they
Yeah,
do. There's a
right.
martial arts concept called Kaizen. And the concept of Kaizen is really something we hear Tony Robbins talk about when he says constant, never ending improvement. The
Yes.
martial arts philosophy of Kaizen is that every day we strive to become just a little bit better in some area of
Hmm.
our life. So we
Yeah.
show up as a better version of ourselves today than we did yesterday.
Yeah.
And then we repeat
If
the
we
process
want
today.
the current model, it would be James Clear of Atomic Habits, the
Absolutely. James Clear of
1%
Atomic
battle.
Habits is another one. I
Yeah.
shared a stage with James a few months
That's
ago.
that's
Incredible
amazing.
guy. But yeah,
Amazing.
he's an incredible individual that understands the very same thing. And Albert Einstein
Absolutely.
to me was really one of the guys that helped me understand this. And Einstein,
Okay.
we think of him as this brilliant scientist, but he was an incredible practitioner and study of human behavior. And Einstein famously said, "The world that you've created is a process of your thinking, and that
Yeah.
world can't be changed without first changing your thinking." And as we learn to change the quality of our thinking, we change the quality of what we can say, what we can do, and what we can become. And so, if we really want to become world class, we've got to look at the examples: the Tiger Woods, the Kobe Bryants, the Stephen Currys.
Right.
You pick the great people. They've done things that first stretch the quality of their thinking,
Yep.
believing that they were capable of saying, doing, and becoming more, and then stepping into that reality through ongoing Kaizen, constant, never ending improvement to constantly elevate what they're capable of doing and really discovering that they can say, do, become, and accomplish more as they stretch the quality of what they believe is possible.
Hmm. In in today's world, are people really stretching themselves to be open and available to opportunities and growth?
Uh, Statistically, no. The last study I saw was from the CKIG Inner Circle, and what they found is 95%. Now, this is people in America. I haven't had an opportunity to look globally, but just here in
Hmm.
America, 95% of the people living here in the United States today live an average, mediocre, lackluster life because
Yeah.
they're content with the status quo. They
Right.
don't want to change what's going on in their lives. They live most of their day on autopilot. And as a result of that, they never rise to their full potential. They've
Right.
got this incredible black belt leader inside of them waiting to be discovered, developed, and deployed, but they're okay with just being okay. And if you're okay
Yeah.
with just being okay, that's all you're ever going to be, is just
Right.
okay.
Right. And just make sure that if that is your reality and your expectation, then you're okay with okay coming back. So your expectations have to align with the input and effort that you're putting in to the your normal daily average life. I just had the privilege of talking with one of the guys in my Call to Rise program, and we've lost 30 pounds. He's completely shifted from uh,
Mhm.
just being unfortunately a couch potato in a sense to he's going to run a marathon here in October this year, which is pretty radical. He also has quit his job and moved back into his more home environment in Tennessee from Cleveland. And this has actually given him a rejuvenation. This is his first week that he's unemployed. And we had just had a conversation about that and the mindset and opportunity type conversation were things that I was presenting to him. Like, hey, this is awesome for you. I'm really glad that you chose this because you were just in this cycle of just discontentment and not thriving in his body weight at 240 pounds. He's actually episode 34 of Driven for Health. So if you want to hear Lucas talk about some of these things and his transformation of what we did, that was back in November, December or so. But it's been even more facilitated through being open to change, being open to putting himself in different rooms or different environments or different social connections, because those are the things that we talked about. Hey,
Right.
if you're hanging out with these people and this is the outcome that you get, how about we hang out with those people or find other people that are doing different things? And that's where the running group. So he stopped hanging out with his work buddies and started hanging out with a morning Saturday morning run group. And so all of a sudden Friday night wasn't hanging out doing whatever till late night. He would be in bed and he would get up and go run, and that would help with the discipline and things that we're talking about to then allow him to be like, oh wow, I can do bigger things. So like, hey, maybe I do want to do a marathon, and that was completely on him. And I'm going to foster that as doing bigger things so that it can then lever. He's only 26, so he's got a lot of time ahead to do bigger things. So it's really awesome. Uh, uh, and that's really where I believe you spend a lot of time working with people, right? Is their
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
let's talk about some of the first steps that of like what even gets someone to recognize that they need some help in their day-to-day thoughts, their patterns, their discipline, and changing their life to improve it.
Yeah. One of the things my grandfather taught me early on, he was a coal miner growing up. And then after he
Okay.
retired, he, tended a garden until he died. And when I was a young boy, he would tell me early on, we would see eagles that would be circling above his pasture. And he would point at those and he would say, son, if you want to soar with eagles, you can't spend your time hanging out with turkeys. And I've learned to appreciate that statement over the years because it's really that, what Jim Rohn said, you become the five people that you spend the most time with, and
Yep.
their lives influence you. And if you're hanging with people that are okay with okay, you're never going to have an opportunity to be a superstar.
Right.
But one of the things that I've learned uniquely, Brian, is since about 2012, I've really leaned into the world of human behavior, understanding how we're hardwired, how we're influenced in the early formative years of our lives. And if you had parents, you had grandparents, you had siblings, and the influencers around you that were okay with average and mediocre, you were pre programmed, whether you realized it or not, to
Yep.
be average,
Yep.
mediocre, lackluster, and not have the opportunity to step into the incredible greatness of who you are. I
Right.
was just with a young man in Colorado that offered to give me a ride to an event. I was leading a leadership retreat in Vail, and he picked me up at the airport, drove 2 hours to drop me off because he wanted to talk. And as
Yeah.
we spent time talking, he was telling
It's a
me
good
growing up,
opportunity to bend
yeah,
your ear.
great opportunity to have 2 hours of free consulting as
Yeah.
we're driving in the road. But as a young man, his dad always told him he was worthless. He would never amount
Ah,
to anything. And
it's
all
sad.
this constant belittlement that he
Right.
endured all of the formative years of his life. And
Right.
he's now in his late 30s, early 40s. And it's been a challenge and it's been a
Sure.
process over the last 4 or 5 years as we've worked together to help him overcome that limited thinking and that belief in
Right.
himself that he was worthless, that he didn't have any value, that he didn't have any potential, he had no skills and no talents. And this gentleman has risen to build an incredible company, an incredible organization that literally now has global impact. But he
Wow.
still struggles every single
Right.
day with these
Subconscious.
mindset issues. And it goes back to, in my book, Black Belt Leadership 101, the very first quality of becoming a black belt leader is belief, because you cannot achieve what you do not believe. And as he's worked on improving his belief, again, going back to that Einstein statement, improving the quality of his thinking all of a sudden he's discovering that he can do more. And
Mm.
one of the statements I love to share with him, Brian, is something one of my own personal coaches shares with me often. He says, John, it's not that you can't, it's that you won't. And that
Right.
choice is yours. And every single day we get up, and if there's something that we don't believe we're capable of doing, it's very easy to cop out and say, well, I can't do that. Well, most of the time when we say that, what we're really saying is, I choose not to do that because I don't want to fail. Well,
Right.
failure is the way we learn. And as we
Right.
fail our way to success, all of a sudden we discover that we can do more than we believe we were capable of doing.
I 1000% agree with that. And you have to create opportunity to even put yourself in the room. Like, just for example, the podcast here, this
Yeah.
is an expression of me getting out to network, to connect with other people of like minds, to be in different rooms. Because I'm a father of four, it's really easy for me to just get lost in being dad in
Yeah.
a sense, and being just here in my workspace. This is my gym, my workspace, my office, whatever. And so I could just be like hanging out here and not think bigger, not experience and
Hmm.
anything that I'm trying to do. Lots of people have already done before, and so there is already that sheer belief and opportunity to create those things and just ever evolve. So that's really excellent that he has gone from the gentleman that drove you from this disbelief to creating something empowering, but because of those subconscious conversations that are ongoing in his head from his past, he probably has to work on it. There has to be a daily discipline, a daily
Absolutely.
practice to make sure that he stays
Yeah.
on track. What end up being some of the key characteristics that you see between someone being successfully starting to believe and achieve and doing bigger, better things for themselves and the world as a whole, versus staying in that hamster wheel, that loop of in my world, just they gain and lose the same weight all the time.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. You know, one of the big challenges that we see, and I was sharing this with a group I was training yesterday, is the fact that we know as we look and we study the brain and we study neuroscience and looking at human behavior, every single day we experience somewhere between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
around 90 to
Yeah.
95% of those thoughts are repetitive, and over
Right.
80% of those thoughts are negative. And if we listen to that nagging little voice that's constantly telling us what we can't do, and we lean into that self talk, the brain is an incredible machine, but the brain is going to give you what it believes to be true. And if you're willing to accept the limiting beliefs people have placed on you, the limiting things they've spoken over you, and you believe that to be true, your brain is going to do everything in its power to make that come into its physical
Prove it
representation in
right.
the earth. So, one of the first things I challenge people to do is to examine and confront the little conversations they're having with themselves and ask themselves a very simple question: is what you're telling yourself really true? Or
Right.
is it a lie that you believe is truth simply because somebody else told you? And it's in those moments of self reflection, as we begin to look within, all of a sudden we discover that spark of greatness, that black belt leader, as I love to call it, that gives you an opportunity to discover that you were put on this earth on purpose and for a purpose. And as we begin to develop ourselves, we find that we are more than capable of stepping into that purpose and making a difference right where we are. But it all starts with challenging that nagging little voice and getting rid of all those I can'ts and I wants, and be willing to
Mhm.
say, I will try. And to borrow a very powerful phrase from Og Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World, I will persist until
Yes.
I succeed.
Yep. Do you, speaking of that, to help some of you guys listening in, is there a tip, a trick, a hack that you have people sit down and do? Is it for you? Maybe think of like Tony Robbins affirmations, or there one tool that I've used to help pattern interrupt negative thoughts and all is a rubber band trick. You put a rubber
Mhm.
band on yourself and you catch yourself in the act of doing something that is against what you actually want, the outcome of the things that you want, then you just pull it and you snap it, and
Mhm.
it gives you a little zing there to snap out of it, so to speak,
Yeah,
of like, okay, this is a pattern behavior that I have
yeah,
to create a different approach to.
yeah. Well, where I start, Brian, is I really start with I've developed a tool over the years that I use to help people understand how they have been uniquely created to succeed. That tool is called the Moore Score. And
Yeah.
what that is that's a compilation of taking the very best of personality profiles that we've seen over the years, DISC and Myers Briggs and all the
Right.
different personality systems that are there, but blending into this very simple assessment elements of emotional intelligence, understanding how we show up, how we
EQ.
regulate our emotions, how our emotions can overwhelm us. And from that, we walk through a very simple process that help people understand this is how you are uniquely made to experience success in your life. And once they understand and see what's innately inside of them, and I walk them through a simple path of how you spend more time in these areas where you're gifted to succeed, the end result of spending more time in the areas of your strength, of your giftedness, of where you've been uniquely designed to excel, and you focus on developing yourself in those areas, the natural outcome is more success in your life. I recently did this assessment with a group of 28 leaders in Vail, Colorado, at this leadership summit that I
Okay.
attended. And every single one of them came up that was over and says, I didn't realize that I was living my life this way. And now I understand, well, when I do these things, I'm more successful than when I don't. That
Hmm.
one 5-minute exercise with them awakened in these alpha males and alpha females that were part of this incredible leadership team, made them realize if I do more of this, I'm going to be more successful in my personal life, in my relationships, in my health and wellness, in my finances, in multiple areas of my life. I can experience more success with a very simple 5-minute assessment to really learn from maybe for the very first time who they are.
Yeah, right, right. Definitely. And what were one or two of the more common themes that popped out for the whole group as a whole?
Well, what was interesting there is some of the people realized that certain aspects of the job, the tasks that they were required to do, were areas outside of their expertise. But they discovered
Huh.
there were other team members on the same team that excelled in those areas. So, one of the outcomes that came out of this group of 28 individuals was recognizing the unique strengths and weaknesses of every single person on the team, and then knowing collectively
Mm,
what the organization has to do to see success, as they were able to make some reassignments of duties and responsibilities so every team member could spend more time doing what he or she was best at doing. Now we're creating an organization that's not being 30, 40, 50% effective. They're now moving into
right.
70, 80, 90% effective
Yes.
because everybody's operating in the areas of their greatest strength and their areas of their greatest talent and ability. That was an
Right.
immediate aha moment for every single person on the team.
Right. And we have the concept of like getting the right people on the bus
Mhm.
in a sense. In this situation, you had a lot of opportunities, skill sets, but they were in the wrong seats.
Correct.
And then you may not have thought that this person was highly effective at their job and such, but you just weren't maximizing their opportunity or skill sets or why they were even there in the first place
Yeah.
to then create and facilitate the changes that we need in this organization to do better work.
Right. It really boils down to 3 things. There are areas which we can be fulfilled, and that's when we're
Yep.
operating the areas of our greatest giftedness. If we
Yep.
look at how we're uniquely wired for success, the more time we spend in that area, the more success we're gonna experience, but the more
Right.
fulfilled we are. And when we're
Right.
more fulfilled, we stay energized to continue to do those things. You're a runner. When you run, you get this release of endorphins and all these
Right.
feel-good chemicals, and once you get into that zone, you feel like you can run forever.
Right.
That's a gift, that's a talent that you have. Now, there are also areas of frustration, things we can do that we're capable of doing, but we
Right.
don't get any fulfillment. If we spend too much time in our lives in those areas, we end up burning out because while we can
Right.
do those tasks and do those things, they don't give us any joy, fulfillment, and they don't energize our bodies. And then there's certain things that we just aren't hardwired to do and will never be successful at doing. And if we're forced into an area where we've got to live our life in that area, all of a sudden, all the negative attributes, we begin to overeat, we begin to drink, we begin to smoke, we begin to
Yep.
experiment with drugs, we begin to be verbally or physically abusive with the people around us. We engage in these negative behaviors. Why? Because we're seeking some relief from the frustration we're experiencing or the failure
Hmm.
that we're going through because we're
Right.
not operating in that area of fulfillment where our strengths, our talents, and our abilities are best being used so we can
Right.
experience more success in our lives.
Right. And sometimes for people, they're just literally exposing themselves to the wrong situation and not getting out of it to then go find that better opportunity. That's what was happening with Lucas.
Mhm.
He was in a job that sure paid the bills and it checked the box, but it was, he even commented, is today is really weird. I don't have this pre-programmed walk through the day type thing that I have to do. And he even commented of he was very effective and efficient at his work, and he'd be done at 2 o'clock basically with all his stuff, but he had to stay there till 5 because of it. And then they just give him busy work and things that
Mhm.
then create more frustration or anything. Whereas, say, if he was his own entrepreneur, he would just be done for the day, and then he could move on to other aspects of what he wanted to do or what fulfilled him and rejuvenated him from just work or
Yeah,
doing other
100%.
things.
And there's certain people based upon how our brains are wired for success. There are certain people whose personalities and emotional intelligence profiles complement us and help us become better
Yes.
and support
Yep.
us. But there are also people that their personality, their emotional intelligence, and the way they show up are actually negatives in our lives. They're actually a cancer in our lives that can cause us to have the very negative character qualities that we don't want to live out show up because they
Right.
push us into patterns of frustration. They push us towards failure
Right.
simply because it's a contradictory pattern to what we need to be doing in our lives to experience success in every single area that we want
Hmm.
to enjoy success.
Right. I'm thinking of this particular situation in a relationship, in a marriage.
Mhm.
And in general, most people, they fall in love, and there's attributions that they find in the other person that they really like and enjoy. And then as marriage goes on, then we start to see these more aligned things that create friction. Is in this situation, just even in business, I'm curious, in your eyes, do you see that it's more of there is it's a lack of a skill and being able to understand and manage what is going on, or do they like for Lucas's situation, does he really just need to go find another job to find that
Yeah, and that
that
yeah, that's a good question, Brian, and I'll go back
mm,
to the relationship side, and I'll use a personal example. I've been married to a beautiful woman for 31 years, and when we first got
that's
married
wonderful.
and began to get to know each other, my wife compliments me, and if you look at how my more score shows up, in the areas I'm weak, she's strong. So together
Yep.
we complement each other. But one of the
Yep.
things that is unique about my wife is she loves detail. She loves to understand. When I would come in from a trip traveling and speaking, she would say, "Tell me about your day." Well, I'm a
Yep.
fun loving, high energy, ADHD kind of guy that I just, when I get home, I want to go out and play with the dogs. When my kids were little and raising six
Yeah.
kids, I wanted to go play with the kids. I was the
Yeah.
dad that never grew up. And I never took the
Right.
time early on in our relationship to sit down and say, "Let me tell you about my day. Let me tell you
Right.
about the lives I touched, the things that I saw that were transformational for the people in the room." And when I
Right.
realized that she needed that to be able to feel fulfilled, then it allowed me
Right.
to take those times to be able to speak into her life and allow those things to happen. And
Right.
that in itself strengthened our relationship and
Sure.
understanding that there are things that she needs, I need to give her because this is what's important to her and this is how she feels valued.
Right.
That's another
Right.
area that we found in the Moore score when it comes to relationships that can really be beneficial. Same thing in our health and wellness. Based upon how we're wired, there are certain things that we may do when it comes to health and wellness, certain things we skip over that we don't think are important. And as a result of that, we don't live the healthiest lifestyle that we could.
Right.
My personality profile, as an example, and the way I'm wired, I'm one of these guys that, I'm a carnivore when it comes to eating, but I love my sweets. I love my Mountain
Yeah.
Dew. I love my gummy bear. And those things can get me in trouble if I'm not careful.
Yes. Yes,
But
they
on the
can.
other hand, other people I know are very structured in the way they eat, and those things aren't a problem for them. So knowing how we're wired for success, but also know how we're wired for failure and how if we're not careful, we allow these little failures to sneak into our lives. And as a
Mhm.
result of that, they can wreak havoc if we don't recognize they're there.
Right. Yeah, going back to your relationship, it makes me think of her wanting to hear what you did while you were away is the companion or the opposite of what you were doing. You were out doing the things and she was doing other tasks in your relationship and need of like raising kids or whatever the responsibilities were that you both have agreed upon. So you being able to then share what you were capable of doing was an extension of what she was doing in other areas of your relationship to then feel fulfilled in our own right and get value of like, okay, he went away for a week, I was doing this, I feel better now because he was able to do what he needed to do, and that makes me feel really good for doing the things that I wanted to do or had to do here in a sense while he was away.
Yeah, and
That
she's a
that
people person, she's a
Yeah.
change the world type person. And when I
Yeah,
can
so
come
she
back and say,
definitely needs
"This
that.
is what I did to help change the lives of someone and help change the world in the
Yeah.
process," there was great value in her
Yeah.
knowing that what she's doing at home was supporting me so I could do what I did. And as an extension of what I'm doing, she was helping me fulfill her goal of changing the world.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you're able, as soon as you recognize that, then you're able to, okay, we'll have a debrief in a sense and help fill her cup, so to speak, on
Absolutely.
adding that value and reciprocating from being away for so long, and then you can go play, right, or
That's right.
or vice versa,
Absolutely.
whatever it is. Like,
Yep.
hey, can I just play for a little bit, and then I will talk your ear, I'll bend your ear for hours after that. I just
There you
want to
go.
like go move
100%.
myself. I've been on
Yeah.
a plane for however long or whatever. Nice. Now, what are some of the pillars from your more score that you have seen that most people are have strengths in, and then where are some of the weaknesses that we see? I'm
Well,
curious
it
if
it
there's
yeah,
trends or
it varies by
characteristics.
individual because we're
Okay.
all unique in the way that we've been hardwired. Some
Right.
people are very methodical, they are very structured, they want things in order, and they've gotta have that to see success in life. Other people are more big picture, very creative, very challenging in the way that they want to approach things, and they want to be able to validate independently information they've given so they can make their own decisions. Other people are very responsive to the world. They're very outgoing. They're very energetic, and they're willing to go and do what other people aren't willing to do because they're willing to take those risks in the marketplace. And then there are other people that are very empathetic. They're very people and cause focused, but we're all a unique blend of all four of those modalities. And how those show up in our lives are going to dictate what success looks like to us, where we have an opportunity to excel, but also it's going to help us see the areas where we put ourselves in positions that people can trigger us and allow these negative character values that are a part of who we are to show up in our lives and end up sabotaging our success simply because we don't know who we are. We don't know
Right.
how we're wired for success. And as a result of that, we don't know the triggers that can actually sabotage us and prevent us from experiencing the success and fulfillment that every single one of us want to achieve if we want to lead ourselves well and make good choices and ultimately lead
Right.
others.
Right. Not just live in okay existence.
It's correct. Yeah.
Right. Right. All right. The next question is when what's an expression of when people start to become aware of their where their strong strengths are and start to improve on their weaknesses? What's a story of you seen some of this transformation? Because everyone loves stories, and that's where we can really get the information to get someone to take action on, in a sense. So do you have a one example of that comes top of mind of
Yeah,
someone
I can
who's
give you an
becoming?
example of one
Yeah.
individual that I can think about that when he discovered what he was great at doing, he was able to step into the greatness of who he was. He was
Yeah.
working as a sales professional for an organization, very well connected. He knew everybody in that particular community. But when it
Yeah.
came to selling, he couldn't close a deal. He was
Okay.
frustrated. His employer was frustrated because they were
Sure.
spending money for this guy to get in front of all of these people. and have an opportunity for this company to excel. And for
Right.
18 months, he was an abysmal failure. And as we
Oh,
began to talk through what was going on in his life and his frustration and now moving into this area of failure, he was trying to figure out, what can I do differently? And as we began to talk about where his strengths were, we took him through the assessment, gave him an opportunity to understand the uniqueness of who he was. One of the things he realized for the first time is, I'm not as good at sales as I thought I was. I
right.
know everybody. I have relationship with everybody. And once a sale is made, I can cultivate that relationship. I can maintain that relationship. I can build on that relationship to make sure that everything that we promised in the sale gets fulfilled. And
Right.
inside that organization, shifting this individual from being an outside salesman to being the leader of the team that provided the fulfillment once that sale was made,
Mm,
he went from struggling and feeling like he was an abysmal failure to thriving in a way that he's never thrived before, because he was able to take his ability, his love for people, his
right.
desire to see them get fulfillment in their lives, and lean in and build those relationships and maintain those relationships. That for him was a game changer. I
Mhm,
think to
mhm.
another individual that struggled to connect with his wife and he couldn't figure out why he and his wife all the time fought. Well, as we took him through the assessment, we found out they were almost identical in the way they showed up. And they were
Ah,
both fighting for control in the relationship. And all of a sudden, when they realized they were both fighting for control, but they both wanted control for the same reason, because they wanted this relationship to succeed,
right.
one of them realized, there are times when I'm going to have to let the other person be in control.
Lead.
And as
Right.
they began to share those responsibilities and say, you be in control of this part of the relationship, I'll be in control of this part of the relationship, and they agreed on that. Now, each of those individuals could lead in the areas of their strengths. They could lead and use their talents and abilities. And now, years later, that marriage is still strong. It's still vital. And they're raising some incredible children who are learning to be leaders in and of themselves. And now you've got this incredible leadership team and this husband and wife raising these incredible kids that are learning to lead themselves and at a young age already leading others. Why? Because they discovered how to work together and how to take the
Right.
things that were tearing them apart and revisit those things and find a way to move those things forward so they became positives, not negatives in their lives.
Yeah, that's transformative, right? For the couple so that they don't just go down a destructive relationship patterns of behaviors, and then for their children, and then just for the people in that they can improve and touch and impact in their life. So that's awesome. That
Yeah,
really is
when
awesome.
half of all marriages end in divorce, and we can have some way to step into that and help people realize this is a commitment that you made to spend the rest of
Yes.
your life with that person. How do we help them do that? By
Right.
understanding the uniqueness of who they are, what they bring to the table, and how, as they use those things for the benefit of serving each other, all of a sudden life gets a whole lot better.
Right, right. And it's a constant communication, it's
Absolutely.
constant evolution of skills
Yeah.
and development and habits. You have the concept of mushin, and
Yes.
maybe this is a good time to bring that into our conversation. And what
Yeah.
is mushin, and how does that fit, and even just the context of the example that you shared?
Yeah, so Mushin is part of Black Belt Leadership 101, and that is something in martial arts that we develop over time. Mushin is a Japanese term that literally means no mind. And in martial arts, we train in predictable response training, blocking, punching, kicking, throwing, arm locks, all the other physical things we do those to the point that when somebody approaches us and they throw a punch or they throw a kick or they come at us with a bottle or a knife or whatever, we don't have to think, what do I do? We've honed our bodies and our minds to such a level that we instantly respond without conscious thought, because it becomes a part of who we are. And as
Mhm.
we begin to develop ourselves, as we begin to discover that unique black belt leader within us, and we discover that we're capable of more, and we begin to hone those skills and abilities, we don't have to stop and think, well, what would a dad do in that scenario? What would a mom do in that scenario? What would a business owner do in that scenario? We continued to use Kaizen, constant, never ending improvement, to develop the quality of our thinking to the point that we don't have to think. It literally becomes a part of who we are. It's a transformational process that allows us to move into a better version of ourselves and a constantly evolving for the better version of ourselves every single day for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that's very good. That is a constant that you have to become automatic. And in my world, we spend a lot of time with nutrition and fitness and creating these lifestyles and the opportunities to create these habits, these behaviors that then facilitate the outcome that we want, a healthier body that we don't have to think about what we're going to eat today. Sure, you will think of making choices and how much you're gonna eat or what you're gonna eat or any of that. That's an obvious conscious thought, but the undertone of just making decisions to be at a healthy body weight for the rest of your life and get out of the rat race of losing and gaining potentially hundreds of pounds. One of my most recent guys that I brought into my program, he's for 30 plus years, 40 years, he's been gaining and losing. I think we calculated he's lost over 500-600 pounds
Yeah,
in
that's
in that
fantastic.
time
Yeah,
frame. And it's not helpful because now he's still not in the place where he wants to be, and it's consumed a lot of his life. And he's an active individual. He's ran
yeah,
marathons and 100-mile bike rides and hikes in the mountains, but he's still overweight and cannot get this trance or whatever to do. And that's what we're working on now, is to obviously do that. There
sure.
is one phrase that you and I both really enjoy talking about, and there's actually two of them. But one is, when opportunity shows up, it's too late to prepare. John Wooden. And so let's jump into some John Wooden. I always loved the story of how he would open up his basketball. He's a late great NCAA champion coach, and he would have people start his team start with tying their shoes. That was the very first lesson, because that was instrumental in making sure that that very subtle basic thing didn't cost them a game winning shot, in a sense, or getting behind.
Yeah. When you think of John Wooden, I love his "When opportunity knocks, it's too late to prepare." That to me
Right.
speaks volumes because every single day we're preparing for what may happen tomorrow. I just
Right.
recorded a podcast last night that'll drop next week. And in that, I talk about the fact that in life, we have things that we know. We also have known unknowns, things that could happen, but we don't know if they're going to happen or not, but we can prepare for those. But the other thing that John Wooden really, really stressed upon and making sure that was important for his players, and it's really valuable in every single area of our lives, are the unknown unknowns. The things that we don't know are going to happen, that we have no idea how to prepare for. But as we develop ourselves, as we stretch the quality of our thinking and learn to think outside the box, when those things show up, now we have an opportunity to respond in real time and be able to pivot in a moment so that if things on the court change and
Right.
we've got an offense or a defense we've never seen before, there's enough skill and talent developed within
Mhm.
us and the ability to pivot that we can make the changes that are necessary to do that. We see Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the Rangers, all our
Right.
special forces constantly are training in not just the knowns and the known unknowns, but they're considering the unknown unknowns that could show up in the heat of battle. And as a result of that, that's how these elite soldiers can go do the incredible things they do and to go in against overwhelming odds, complete their mission, and come home safely. That is because they are preparing themselves every single day, not just for the known
Right.
and not just for the known unknown, but learning how to be able to pivot in a moment's notice and to improvise when necessary to keep moving forward.
Yep. I love that. And that just piggybacks exactly on Kaizen and Mushin to help
100%.
with this
Yes.
encoding in your body. And it's important to be training every day to put yourself in the opportunity so that when things happen, you can facilitate, you can be lean, agile, and adjust for the known, the unknown known, and the unknown unknown as well. Now, as we start to wrap up, what is a key takeaway that someone needs to hear listening in to our episode that can get them, think of someone that has not been taking action, and that they just need a starting point? What would you share or tell or uh, speak into their ear on to help motivate them or move them
I
in the right
think
direction?
back to it was April of 2017. I was traveling to spend my very first time working with Dr. John Maxwell, and at that
Yeah.
time, the John Maxwell team. I took my
Yep.
17-year-old daughter Jessie with me, my middle daughter of my 6 children. And while we were there, she really found favor with the leadership that were there, and she got an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Dr. John. And one of the
Nice.
things Dr. John told her at 17 years of age is he looked at her and he said, "Young lady, if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this: fail early, fail often, but fail forward."
Yeah.
And when I think about that, how often do we go back to the quote I shared earlier from one of my mentors? It's not that we can't, it's that we won't. And that choice is ours. Oftentimes, we don't move forward because we're afraid we're going to fail. Well, we've been failing our entire lives. From the minute we were born, our parents tried to set us up, we fell over. We tried to crawl as a baby, we failed. We tried to
Yeah.
stand up next to the couch, we fell down. We tried to put Cheerios in our mouth and we put them up our nose and in our ear and down our shirt and all these other things. We failed our way forward our entire
Right.
lives. But
Right.
this is how we learn. In the
Right.
martial arts, we talk about this concept of yin and yang, the opposites.
Yeah.
You can't have success without failure. And in every success, there's an element of failure in the fact that we could have done better than what we did, even though we succeeded. And there was an element of failure that held us back from succeeding at a higher level. But in every failure that we experience, there's a lesson to be learned that if we learn it and we apply it to our lives, it moves us closer to success the next time. I think really, Brian, the best example, Thomas Edison. He failed
Oh yeah.
10,000 times
Yep.
before he
That's
created
the
the
story.
incandescent light
Yep.
bulb. And what did he say? I didn't fail 10,000 times. I discovered 10,000 ways not to make the incandescent light bulb. He
Yep.
failed early, he failed forward, and he kept failing to success. And if I could leave your audience with one thing, it would be that is to be willing to fail. Whatever we do the first time, we're probably not going to succeed at, but that's okay.
Right.
If we learn, we apply, we get better, and down the road, we become not just successful, but super successful.
Right, right. And ultimately what Dr. John is saying here is that we have to learn moving forward and then we try different approaches. So if
Absolutely.
you are stuck in the cycle of doing the things and getting the outcome,
Yeah.
you need to do something different and you need to go find other people to do different. You have to understand skills that you may or may not be having. You have to improve those. You have to look at the more score and see where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, to be able to then open up new relationships and connections and opportunities. And then we have the daily practice, and that
Yeah.
is something that Dr. John
Yeah.
and I do in our own lives, and we encourage you to do in your own as well, starting with health. As you can tell, he's, if you're watching the video, Dr. John's fit and in shape because he takes care of himself and he realizes that health is a pivotal point in this pyramid of understanding how to change and to grow and to evolve forward, because change is inevitable and we want to live higher quality lives and give more value to the world than just an okay existence. So we have to do things different from other people.
Yeah.
So that is awesome.
Yeah. Brian, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten.
Yeah.
And knowing that
So
95% of the world is average, if you do what the rest of the world is doing, you're only going to get average results. But if you're
right.
willing to do what nobody else is doing and you're willing to become the very best at doing what you can do, you're not only going to stand out, you're going to get noticed and you're going to get ahead. That's a very simple philosophy for success in every single area of our lives.
Yeah, you go back to Albert Einstein, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different
It's insanity.
results
Yeah.
is insanity.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So excellent. Well, we've got. Where can we find you? Tell us about the More Score, your podcast. Where
Absolutely.
can
So
the listeners find you?
I'm going to direct the listeners to two different websites. If you want to learn about black belt leadership, you can simply go to blackbeltleadership.com. And if you want to know how you're uniquely hardwired for success and what you need to do to experience more success in every area of your life, you can go to yourmorescore.com. And there you're going to be able to take a very short 5-minute assessment or less And it's free, doesn't cost you anything. You're not signing up for anything. You're not going to get inundated with all of these offers. You'll get some occasional educational information on helping you become a better version of who you are and what you do. And there's also a link on blackbeltleadership.com to the More Score as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Wow. And then a podcast. What's the podcast?
So the podcast is Black Belt Leadership. You can find that. It's on all the major podcast channels. There's actually a link in the contact us area of my website with all, well, not all of them, but several of the podcast channels that are out there: iTunes, Apple, YouTube. It's Spotify. It's out there on many of them. Every Thursday, 10 a.m. Central, I drop a new installment.
Excellent. Excellent. And if you've been following mine, I drop mine at 5 a.m. whenever I have another one done. So, and I keep producing. So I haven't fallen into a weekly schedule. I'm trying to get a lot of volume out there in this. So for my listeners, there's going to
Yeah,
be
and I love
lots
what you're
more.
doing. So keep it up,
Yeah,
man.
there's
Yeah.
a lot more because I'm practicing. I'm doing Mamba mentality, right? Showing up, doing the work, creating opportunities, being able to talk, conversate, share in multiple different ways, really pushing myself to be able to connect with people in a lot of different ways. So that's what we're doing here in Driven for Health. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. John. This was awesome. I appreciate your wisdom that you've bestowed upon me, on my audience and listeners. And so let's take some action, guys. You have to improve, you have to change. So, and we can start with yourmorescore.com to learn some of your strengths and weaknesses to be able to then start to improving. So, thanks so much for joining us today.